with me, as always, is my friend and fellow co-host of the Squeaky Wheel, the president, Mr. Lawrence Gervais. Folks, I am Ross, Memphis Pambrin. I am the CEO of the Memphis Group. I am a captain, and Lawrence and I usually get a chance to go through the things in our room. And our guest today, I'm going to bring up in a few seconds. But Lawrence, you're not wearing a traditional shirt. What's going on here?
I'm wearing my 100-year Battle of Oaks commemoration T-shirt that I got in downtown Winnipeg. June 19th. And that sort of commemorates when the nation was actually born in 1816 at the Battle of Seven Oaks, where my ancestor, Pierre Falcon Jr., wrote the first Métis national anthem. And it was kind of a nice experience to go down there and go through the ceremony and get this nice shirt as a souvenir.
Oh, now, are you wearing that in celebration? Because, folks, our guest today is one of the heavy hitters in the Métis community. Our guest today is Audrey Poitras, and she is the president, I would say, for all of us here in Alberta, as she represents and has her foot both in the federal role as well as within our region community. And folks, I know we've talked about this before. There are 6 regions within this province, and Lawrence being the president of Region 3. Under him is 6 locals. We're going to be asking some, I think, fun questions that are, for us, are the politics behind the Métis community. And I know you have a pretty good relationship with her. Is any of this daunting?
A little bit. I'm wearing this shirt to commemorate, an agreement as a group, first government from Cuthbert Grant, moving into Lou Riel's time, to creating that fiduciary responsibility, to going to where Daniels happened in 2016 and cementing that, and knowing where we're going forward is, a lot of the questions I will be talking with Audrey about. So I look forward to the conversation for sure.
Yeah. And so, folks, here on the Squeaky Wheel, as this is number 10 for us, actually, Lawrence, we've started seeing city councillors. We've started inviting artists onto our show. We've started seeing elders within our community, our Aboriginal veterans. We've brought on consultation coordinators who I'd like to say thank you, folks, to our guest last week was Nicole Shepard of the Region 3, and she's the consultation coordinator. And she opened up some of the dialogue for us regarding consultation and where it had come from the Daniels decision. And I look forward to having Audrey explain a little bit more, because I know you and I talk about it quite a bit, but from her level, where the Daniels decision sort of came from, and her being instrumental, especially with her long-standing history of her role and relationship.
My surprise is this. We've had all these wonderful guests on, and we really need to build our subscribers. So please, if you're watching this, please hit the subscribe button, because that helps us. Right. So
yes.
Yeah.
Very good point, Lawrence. The folks here on the Squeaky Wheel, as though some of you are just listeners and the rest of you are on the video side of it, we often talk about coffee. So Lawrence, today, before Audrey comes on our show, I just wanted to say I was recently up in Jasper, and I picked up from their custom coffee gourmet roaster up there, but this is one of their dark roasts. There's not a lot of groups up there that are roasting coffee, but this dark blend that I poured today is absolutely fantastic. Big shout out to those folks. And Jasper's not a big place, but they do a wonderful job of making some excellent coffee. Folks, we'll also talk about some current issues. Our Métis Connections today, as we mentioned, is going to be with Audrey Poitras, but I think I was so excited I wanted to get that out early. We'll have a little bit of a rant, and then we will talk about some of the things that are happening within our community and our programs from before. So thank you to Nicole Shepard for being here last week. And thank you. We talked about the mask situation in Okotoks and in Airdrie, and that, this is what I actually wanted to talk about. Last week, we were talking about some of the things that were happening regarding the decisions within the communities nearby. But the current issue I wanted to bring up with you was, and I guess because we had talked about it a little earlier, was that some of the smaller communities have decided they don't need to wear masks.
Yeah.
Okotoks and Airdrie being the two bigger ones here in the region that decided they don't need to.
Well, I think maybe
Anything
the mayors,
you want to throw out there?
Yeah, the mayors in both towns probably think there's this big wall in between Calgary that's only you can see Calgary from Airdrie, and Okotoks is, you know, just close to there too. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is, and you know, sometimes the mayors are open to people coming from Calgary to shop in their towns, right? And you know, that's what maybe that's the reason behind their decisions. I don't know, but we know that will probably happen if people are anti-maskers or feeling like their rights have been violated. Will come to an area like this to certainly shop if they need to.
Yeah, and I think again, I know here on our little conversation group we talk, folks. If your choice is that you can wear a mask, I still fully support that. And though it may not have made that decision within your community, you get the right to make the choice. Again, they're not forcing you, but I still think you get the right to make the choice. And if we do all continue to do our little bit of a part, I think we're going to hopefully weather it faster.
Yeah.
But I guess time is still going to continue to tell.
Well, I think September's the mark. You know, people want their kids to go to school. And if you want your kids to go to school, practice safe distancing and masking. It's the only way we're going to get there right now. If the ones that don't, well, if school gets canceled in September because our numbers go up, well, then that's really our action as community members.
Yeah. And I do know there will be a lot of frustrated parents if that actually happens. So, Lawrence, I think it's time, if you're okay with that we bring Audrey into this conversation. And folks, this is exciting for me because I know though we are doing quite well when it comes to subscribers and our listeners and our people who email us to ask us questions, there's going to be a lot more conversation that happens based on the fact that we're bringing Audrey into this conversation and to thank her. So before I say anything foolish, make sure you just give me a wink and a nod, and let's invite Audrey into this conversation. Now, Lawrence, I know we were bringing this up. This is bringing in the heavy hitters. Here we go. Folks, everybody out there listening to the Squeaky Wheel, those of you who are watching the video podcast, this is our, Lawrence, opportunity to bring in somebody who's both revered by both you and I, and who has carried the torch of the Métis Nation of Alberta for 24 years. Now, Audrey, before I even get to throw in your name and bring up the Poitras name, there's a couple things that I wanted to say about saying thank you for the leadership that you've provided, both as the first female since 1996 for 24 years, through 4 prime ministers you've been sitting since Chrétien, through Martin, through Harper, all the way to Trudeau. The accolades, the rewards, I know Lawrence and I were talking about this before, and I was looking up some of them from the municipal areas of the schools, from the provincial areas, from the SAITs, the NAITs, the Queen's Golden Jubilee in 2003. You've seen this, you've carried the sash and you've carried the flag with pride to the distinction of developing the Métis crossing. I thank you, and I know our listeners on the Squeaky Wheel thank you, and the opportunity for the president, Lawrence Gervais, and for myself, Ross Memphis Pammer, to have the chance to chat with you. Thank you for coming on to the Squeaky Wheel. Now, this is where often Lawrence and I have spent a lot of time just talking about ourselves, and a lot of our listeners have heard about us. I want, if you could just give us a little brief intro into Audrey Poitras as well. Maybe tell me just a little bit about something about the resources that got you to where you are today.
Well, thank you very much, Ross. And thank you for those kind words. And yes, it has been a journey for 24 years. I do say that it takes a lot of people to do the work that we do, to have the successes that the Métis Nation has seen over the years. And certainly I've been honored to lead that torch, but there's a lot of people, including our council, our senior staff, our citizens out there, that have all been part of making a lot of these successes reality. It takes a lot of us. And so, when when I first began 24 years ago, it certainly wasn't that I wanted the title or I wanted to be the president. I had worked prior to that for 5 years as a finance director at the Métis Nation of Alberta. And even from that small corner of the Métis Nation, I saw many things that we probably could have and should have done better in order to provide more support to our Métis citizens. And that was what drove me to get to where I needed with the sort of the pushing of some of our key citizens who wanted to see a change as well at that time. And change it was, as you said, first woman president, certainly a finance person, I think was a change as well. And but it's taken a lot, and it's at that first beginning, it was about how do we get back on track to start moving forward. But since that time, I think along with the other leadership we had in place, it really enabled us to convince other people, other governments, other institutions that we needed to be listened to, and we should have the opportunity to do for our citizens what was rightfully belonged to them. And that's been our push on Métis rights, on housing, on education, on all of those things. So it's taken a lot of people. So I'm glad that I get credit for it, but it's taken a lot of people. So thank you for that question.
I know Lawrence has some, he of course being the regional president down here in the South, he has, and we've talked about some excellent questions that he has sort of politically and through within the Métis. One question that I often ask our guests, and I hope you're comfortable with it, and I would imagine after your years of tenure, and I had asked my father this, we had him on because he's an Aboriginal veteran, and I wanted to ask you the same question, being, and I hope you're comfortable with the term matriarch of sort of the Métis community. Where and at what time did you feel sharing the message of being Métis? Where did that start? And for me, Lawrence and our guests have heard it before, but when my dad was really searching for the understanding of what it meant for him with an Indigenous background, I realized at that time, probably 20 years ago, if he's that serious about understanding this is going to be important to me one day. And where do you champion that, or when did that happen that you were comfortable with holding a flag and saying, folks, I'm Métis, and here's how I share that relationship with my community and my family?
So Ross, I think for me, you grow up in a Métis family, and no one ever tells you, oh, you're Métis. It's something you just know. It's there all the time with you. But to say when, for me, as I grew up and I got married, and we certainly enjoyed annual assemblies. My husband was long before I was as involved as I am, my husband was very, very involved in the Métis Nation, from local presidents to volunteering to doing all sorts of things. And I used to just go when I wanted to or when I could. It was only after, and we owned a business, me and my husband. And once we had decided that, you know what, it's time to shut this down and, as we said, have a real life. Well, I'm not sure where that real life came in or what that real life is, but we decided what are we going to do now? We basically closed our business down and said, let's figure out what we're going to do. And being as I'm a finance person, I said, I'm going to see if the Métis Nation needs some help. I'll go and work in the finance department if I can. And sure enough, I was lucky enough to get a job and very soonly became the director of finance, which was a good position to help people understand and talk about what we needed to do in the future. So for me, I think when it really became to me that I needed to do something more than just for myself as a Métis person, but for to support community, was when I made that offer to the Métis Nation to say, I've now done some upgrading. I have about 6 weeks of free labor. If not, I have to go to, I think it was someplace like Coca-Cola or something. So I would be willing to come and work in your finance department for 6 weeks free and see where it goes from here, if there's a job later on or not. And that's what I did do when I worked there. And before my 6 weeks were up, they offered me the job. So, that was a kind of a turning point for me, where I think it was like, I have time. I believe I have things I can offer that will help get us on that track. And that's kind of probably a key point.
And I could hear how that is one of your strength was one of your resources, but also the Métis community then realizing that there's value in somebody who's willing to work for 6 weeks to share their expertise, but then realize the value of keeping you on. Now, I already know and have read a little bit about the fact that you are as even accoladed with influential awards. Lawrence, I feel like I've been hoarding a little too much of Audrey. Please, I need you to, because you've had a number of questions that we want to bring up.
Well, there's certainly a few things that kind of caught my attention. And the first thing is, Audrey's work at Rupert's Land Institute and our education, training, and research arm, which was, I'm sure, something brand new and where it is today. And, being a focal point for all Canada to really model as a good, strong institution for education, training, and research. And my understanding that, Audrey bringing that to the forefront, but her story about realizing that, I need to go into the community and volunteer and for 6 weeks help an organization grow. And our hope is that Rupert's Land Institute members that are going through the education, training, and research arm, that they're able to actually think the same way. Yes, I get a Métis scholarship, but what am I going to contribute in the future? And hopefully that gets to our young people or people who are in school to hopefully one day contribute to the nation themselves, just like what Audrey did. And, find a little bit about who they are while they go through the process. Because once you go into the Métis Nation, you come at a different level, but when you're coming out, you have a full knowledge of who you are and what your ancestors went through and all the leaders from the past. And it becomes ingrained in you. You get that Métis pride once you start volunteering. You just got to start somewhere, right? So I want to thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. And I think, and I've learned, especially with my relationship with Lawrence and the time of getting more involved within the Métis community, this tool of the Squeaky Wheel and the Métis Minutes that we share from that are trying not just to reach people like Lawrence and I think I would assume you'd attest to the fact that if we can get more youth listening or use every opportunity, every avenue in order to share this conversation with our youth, then they will become more engaged. And the more engaged you become and you see that people are willing to wear a sash or do a jig or be involved in Métis Week and share their conversation and take the time to listen to the awareness that you create. You're absolutely right. And thank you, Audrey, for spearheading that and being a part of that conversation. And though we see it, and for me, I see it on this level with Lawrence and our relationship within Region 3, and now we're starting to see more interaction and with groups out east as well who are reaching out to the Squeaky Wheel. Thank you for building on that. So, Lawrence,
be careful when you say east. And east is not a little bit contested issue right now. We don't want to get into that. But the question I have for Audrey is, where do we see the Daniels, of course, because Daniels sort of is a link to, where we are going to be going in the future for self-government. And I we get into an area or questions of, Métis rights and all those accumulative cases in the past from Paoli to where we are now, even going further back all the way to Lou Riel times. But where do you see Métis Nation? Where is their place in Western society than what it is prior to where Daniels was?
Great question.
Thanks, Lawrence, and good to see you.
Thank you.
You know what? I think that there's so many opportunities and so many places that we still need to go. And I think Daniels definitely was one of those big marks that gave us that opportunity. I don't believe there's any going back. And I say that in the sense that, we look back, and even if I only go back as far as 1982 when the Constitution was changed to include the Métis, I remember very clearly our citizens, our leaders at that time saying, this is it, we're there, we're now moving forward. But we all know it didn't last long. and as we go through those different stages, I think we certainly knew, because we were always left out. We believe that those were the times, but I believe now with Daniels at the Supreme Court, with that Manitoba Métis Federation land claim case winning at the Supreme Court, there is no turning back now. It's a matter of, sometimes it never happens fast enough for us, but I believe we're there. And it's proof in just what we have seen in the last couple of years. And you've seen that along with me, Lawrence. If anybody had told me that this was going to happen, I would have said, I think you're crazy, because I believe that for 20 years, we sat and we watched these things happen and nothing came of it. So I think I was as surprised, pleasantly surprised though, as anyone else, that we would actually see those changes, to go through a process with the government of Canada, to sign an MOU to say, this is what we're talking about. This is how we want to be recognized. And then go to the next stage and sign a framework agreement to say, here's the details of it. This is what we mean. These are all the areas that have to be negotiated, that have to be agreed to. And then to get to the agreement to actually sign a self-government agreement where Canada recognized we have a right as the Métis Nation within Alberta to design our own government, to make our own rules, to do all of those kinds of stuff. And we know there's still more work going ahead. We know we're in the midst now of our Constitution. And that we've started that process with setting up a Constitution Committee. Now, since COVID, we're back on track. We've had a couple of meetings. We're going to start doing focus groups or roundtables, whatever that title is going to end up being. And then we're going to go out to community meetings to make sure our citizens are on side with us as what that Constitution should look like. We know also within that agreement, there's other things that have to be worked out. What is those fiscal financing agreements that they talk about? That's about how is our government can be financed. So we no longer have to say, oh, we have to go join the Societies Act, because that's the only way we get any money to do what we need to do as far as our own governments to support our people. So there's those kinds of things that there's a transition plan. How will we go forward, work with Canada differently than what we've had to do under the Societies Act? So there's still lots to do, but it's moving fast. And I know for me, I would have been one that would have said, I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime, but you know what? We did, Lawrence. And I'm so happy for that we are at that point and we're still going forward.
Yeah. And, I love the fact that, once Daniel was there and then the Métis Nation Accord was signed with the Prime Minister, and then we keep moving in different stages and progressive stages. And, I know we're living with COVID right now. But do you see COVID, I know that we talked about progressing to get to the community, and hopefully we can do that soon in a safe manner. But do you see COVID sort of affecting that self-government sort of framework that we're going to decide on?
So, Lawrence, I would say that COVID has certainly slowed us down in our process of our Constitution. We at one point had to just say, let's stop and see right at the very beginning of it how we're going to do this, what we're going to do. But as well as I do, we found ways to have our meetings, just as we're doing today. We had council meetings by Zoom. We had our institution meetings by Zoom. We found ways to do that. We now have Métis Crossing, which has a classroom where we can spread out. It will hold 60 people. So for us as a council, we were able to spread out and have a council meeting for the 15 of us, all being 6 feet apart and still all being together. So we've managed to be able to do those kind of things. And I think we can continue to do that. For focus groups, what we do know we need to do is we need to meet with our elders. We need to meet with our youth. We need to meet with our Judiciary Council. We need to meet with our institution boards. We need to do all of that kind of thing to make sure we're all understanding where we're going with our Constitution, and those things we can do today in smaller groups. When we get to the larger groups, I think we very clearly can find ways of doing that, if it is by virtual meetings. And if not, there's nothing to say that we can't have, where we originally thought we would have one large meeting in each region, there's nothing to say we can't have 3 or 4 meetings in a region at a smaller size to still bring our communities together.
Right.
So I believe it slows us down, but I think we will find ways. I think this way of living has somehow become a new way of thinking of things, and I think people have done an amazing job in getting. I find we've still got our work done by having to look at new ways of doing it, and I think we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, and I think and I think the fashion industry needs to get on board with designing some really fashionable masks. I mean, they really need to get on board, because seeing those plain blue ones aren't attractive anymore, right? But if we're going to live for 6 months, might as well get started on some really nice looking ones. The other thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm sorry about monopolizing the conversation, Ross, but I am close to my Hudson's Bay Company ancestors, and they created a monopoly, no problem, right? So I'm kind of following the same suit. I wanted to ask you, we talked about Canada and the relationship there. Do we ever really have the time today to talk for hours about our relationship with Alberta and where we're headed in terms of, we have a harvesting agreement. We have, agreements here and there. We have agreements to support our provincial leaders, but really at the root of it and where we are with Region 3 in terms of a consultation agreement. And I think maybe a little brief update on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about masks, if that's okay, just for 1 minute. So it's amazing the designers and crafters that we have in the Métis Nation. And I know for me, it is amazing the number of masks that I've received from some of our citizens, masks made out of sash, masks made out of proud to be Métis crossing symbol on a mask. So I do have quite a collection, which is okay, because if we need to wear them, we need to wear them. But to go to the consultation portion, we do have a consultation agreement signed with Canada, which to me is one big step into the whole process. We live in a country of Canada. I believe that should have been easier to continue moving forward within our province once we had a consultation agreement with Canada. But as you say, that hasn't been as easy to do. I believe that government of Alberta has put a new process in place, or another process in place, where they want us to go through a credible assertion process. We are very good at trying to work with everyone and trying to use processes that other governments put into place. So we have filed a credible assertion, but there's a lot of blocks in the way on that, to be truthful. So we do have to look at other ways. And, as our citizens always tell us, we need to keep moving forward. We don't have a lot of time. And so I've now written another letter to the Premier, once again, basically asking them to speed up the process on the credible assertion for our province. And if not, because of course we filed for the whole of the province, and to speed up that process. And if not, it's as our citizens have always told us, negotiation is the answer. But at some point in time, if there's no negotiation, litigation becomes the answer. And for me, litigation is never the answer for anyone, because I don't think, you win, but you don't really win because of the stand everyone takes, because of the length of time it takes, because of all of those things. So I'm hoping that we will find a way to go forward, but we certainly won't sit and do nothing. We can't afford to. It's like you say, it's a process that we have to continue moving forward. Consultation is so important to us all across our province. As far as the harvesting agreement, we've been, we have 5 of our regions that we have a lot of harvesters that have received their harvesting cards and are doing fine. We know down south, for people down south, they can get their harvesting cards by going to a different area where their ancestors were and still are for some of them. That's a process, but it's still, we had a harvesting agreement that clearly showed that we have harvesting rights all across this province. And we're continuing to push that as well. Whether we're gonna do it by way of negotiations and get there or not. We've written another letter on that. But all I can tell our citizens is that as far as myself as the president, and I believe our council today, we are continuing to focus on, we will push, we will do what we have to do to try to make sure that those rights are recognized in some fashion, somehow.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to go through litigation, like you said. I think it's you get inflammatory responses out of everyone involved, including other nations, and it's just a bad process. But sometimes government looks at it as the cheapest process in terms of money, right? And, we don't want a government that actually places our citizens or Albertans in that scenario, right? So we would rather work it out in a way that's good and is in a safe place rather than going into litigation where it just inflames everybody's responses. And I think that's not a good step. But like I said, I mean, I'm Region 3. I'm the president here. I represent these members, and these members want to make sure that we're taking a stronger foot forward, and it's a heavy foot, right? So I just want to make sure, and I appreciate that update for our members today. Ross, I'm sorry, but you can carry on now.
Not at all. Again, I'm always learning. And the awareness, I guess one of the things that I find almost even very complicated too for me, and I imagine the rest of our listeners, is, Audrey, there's one foot definitely federal that you have there. There's another foot that represents the relationships between municipalities and the province. And then I guess you put both feet into trying to, as our provincial governments change, I can see how sometimes things do take longer. New governments now they need to reevaluate. And I think it's not uncommon that we hear that any new government or any new person in that role says, well, I need some time to review this. Sure seems like a lot of time sometimes. But I think something I also want all of our listeners, both the youth who are listening and those who are forced to listen, the youth, and then some of our seniors and our elders, that I think it's important we recognize that we're steering the ship. And the ship doesn't just get to the end of its journey overnight. But as long as we have the right people in place, both elected, both supported, both they feel as though that they have their constituents behind them, we're going to see the Métis community continue to move in the right, positive way. And if we feel like we're getting pushed back a little bit, well, we continue to try and steer that ship forward. So I think a question I sort of had was, not many citizens have had your, again, length of tenure. And there's obviously new challenges as soon as a new prime minister shows up and says, well, I just got elected. How difficult is that? At least the Daniels decision, that the peak of that Daniels decision said, folks, we hit here. And one of the things I had read was your response when that decision was made was an exculpatory yes to the Métis community, somewhat unbelieving, as you pointed out even today. This happened, folks. This happened. This decision happened. Now, every new person who steps into the conversation gets to start here no matter what. And even though it seems we're reclimbing that ladder back to there, telling the government, you have to, we're not asking you to, you have to recognize that. How big is that challenge every time that new government comes around? When does Audrey get frustrated?
Certainly, Ross, it is. I believe it is a big challenge, but it's something that comes with the territory, with where we're at. And I think for myself and our councils, all the time I've been, as president, we have realized that it's no longer okay to just get angry because nobody understands or wants to understand or wants to listen. And it's time to quit banging our fists on the table because it doesn't seem to make a difference anyway. So what we've said is, you know what? We need to make sure that we educate people, that we tell people, that we make people understand. That's our role now, is to make sure that, yes, new people come in, just like when I came in as new as president, or Lawrence came in new as president. you don't know everything once you step through that door. So we have been doing that. We've been doing a lot of educating. And, even we all know about the Hirschhorn case that we took to court for down south. And we had to do a lot of educating there. And we still have to do a lot of educating because different people change, different leaders come on board, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal. And what we always say is, but once we have those opportunities to sit down and tell people, then it's time for them to understand and say, how do we move forward together? And I think that's how we always try to get at it is, it's frustrating at times, but I think it's a process that we all have to do. And, we have citizens out there that are really good at educating too. I mean, I'm not one for a lot of social media just because to begin with, I don't think I find time enough to really be able to do it as efficiently as some of you do. So I'm not as good at it, but I do pick up once in a while, or people send me things, and I know we have a lot of citizens out there that are educating as well and are saying, no, that's wrong. That's not what that says. So we all just have to keep pushing it together. And I think as long as I'm here as the leader, that's what my role is educating as well as trying to take advantage of every single opportunity we get, which will improve the lives for our citizens.
Yeah, that's very well said. When we do, I spend a percentage of my time educating folks too, even in meetings that are really, really important that people want to know who we are. That this is a certain, it's kind of an opinion or a review on our education system in the past and how it's prepared these leaders now today who are non-Métis and understanding who we are, rather than sitting in a grade 7 class and getting mentioned along some fur traders and explorers and basically shoved to the side. And then we move on to this subject. But now we have leaders that are in very high positions in industry or institutions or government going, yeah, we don't know who you are. Can you explain it to us? Right. And so you have to go through that whole system of education. We've had champions on the inside, like, Tom Isaac and all the stuff that he prepared for Canada when he was making his recommendations after, certainly, which led to the Métis Nation Accord, but then him leaving, of course, and working with Saskatchewan. But, as a lawyer who's not Métis, we need more champions in those communities that can really spread the information in a context that's actually appealing to us as Métis Nation representatives too. So it helps prepare us before we get to those meetings that, yeah, you guys know about who you are, right? So, and I find there's only been some circumstances where I've walked in, for instance, a petroleum club, and the lawyers there knew exactly who the Métis people were just because they prepared themselves the day before and read all the case law and understood that the Métis Nation is progressing, and, a little bit of admiration on their side because of it. But do we have those agreements with government that where we're supposed to be? Well, not quite yet. And I say not quite yet because I know we're going to get there. It's just how we get there and when. So,
no, good point. And I think for both of you, one of your distinct challenges is, and just like the staff that I've talked to, how often do you get asked the question of, well, who are the Métis people? You would think you'd answered that question enough time. But here on the Squeaky Wheel, I also think that, folks, this is your opportunity to, we're asking fairly open questions. If people want to know, if they want to learn a little bit more, they do have to take a little bit of responsibility. Here, we're handing it to them. Folks, we have the president of the Métis Nation of Alberta. We have the president of Region 3. People already know they can write to the Squeaky Wheel to reach out to us, and we will ask those questions as best we can. So this is a unique opportunity. And Audrey, again, thank you so very much for it. And I think in order to maybe close a little bit out of our conversation, can you give us one of the messages you want to share to the youth, a message you want to share to all the Métis citizens, and is there something specific you'd like to share to our elders within our community? not trying to separate the groups, but this is a distinct challenge in our COVID community right now. Is there something is there just something very distinctive that we should really focus on as a message that is just an Alberta Métis message right now?
Well, thank you for that, Ross. I think the key message right now, and not because of COVID, everybody needs to be safe. You do need to look after yourself. You need to take care. And even though we don't like this staying away, for people like us, a lot of Métis people, it's never been about not being able to hug and not being able to have gatherings and not being able to socialize, way more than we do now. But it's one of the things that it's what's happening right in our world today. And I too, really miss a lot of that stuff, but I think it's more important that we keep everyone safe. So we need to do that, keep our distance, and do the things like Zoom, like we're doing right now, or call your family, whoever. For the elders, I just say, you are the people that have stood strong when the Métis Nation had nothing. Had no resources, had no facilities, you were the people who stood strong and gave us, the future leaders, the direction of what we needed to do. And I always say thank you for that, because that's how we got to be where we are today. And I always never want to forget to thank the veterans for all they did for us, whether not just for us as Métis, but for all of us as Canadians in standing so strong for our country. For the youth, I'm actually very, very impressed with our youth. At certain times over my time as president, it was very, very difficult to get youth groups, to get them really engaged in wanting to do. And probably a lot of it has to do with the way we're socializing today. They like their social media. They like their iPhones. They like all of those kinds of things. What I find today is we have so many talented young people, whether that's from an educational standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, or from anywhere else, a business standpoint. We have so many talented young people. I see the nation in good hands in the future. And I just say to them, continue to be proud of who you are and continue to make the world better for our Métis people. And for our citizens, it takes all of us. Right now, we're, I believe, at a very key point. And one of the key things for me right now is because we're not sure how long we have left to be able to get our Constitution passed through. There's certain things we can do at an administrative level or a negotiations level with the government around the fiscal financing, about putting the transition plan into place. But for the Constitution itself, it takes our citizens. And I want to encourage all of our citizens, as we come out there, come and be involved. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, because what we want to try to do is have a Constitution that allows everybody to feel a part of the Métis Nation within Alberta. And it takes all of us to do that. And even though COVID's here, I truly believe we'll find a way to do it, because we have to find a way to do it, or we miss an opportunity right now. Yeah. That's where I am with all of that. And I hope that I get many more opportunities to chat with our citizens. And Ross, I do want to say to you and Lawrence, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I know sometimes it's hard to find the time to do some of these things, but it's important. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. There's only so much Audrey Poitras to go around. So thank you for sharing the time. Lawrence, you're going to have a hard time topping that, what she said, but maybe you could close us out and say our thank you today.
Yeah, I mean, on behalf of Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, which really you're a part of, because this is who you represent also. We want to thank you for being on the podcast. This is podcast number 10. So we are moving forward. Hopefully we get to podcast 100, and at least you'll be on at least 5 or 6 of those times. Would be very nice if you can find time for us. But no, I wish you well. And personally, you've been a mentor to me since 2014. And of course, Marlene and her, her passing was a big deal for me. And And you helped me through that too, as a friend and a mentor. And I think that's the kind of person that we have representing us in the province. Is she's always there for a call for me at any time, and I can talk about anything: family, politics, news, other members. She can talk me down from certain places of emotion, or help me deal with who I need to be as a future leader. And hopefully I'll get to the 24-year mark and become perhaps a lifer just like her and Marlene. But I'm very blessed to have Audrey in my life, and I just wanted to say thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Thank you for those kind words, for sure.
I couldn't say it any better than that. Thank you, Audrey, for attending the Squeaky Wheel today. And we look forward to our next opportunity to chat.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
When we have guests that have that, again, I use the term tenure, and I don't use it lightly, with 24 years at the helm, she has seen, I'm sure, a lot of angry people. She's seen a lot of frustrated people. She's seen, and I know you do, because I know that when we talk, we look at that level. And with 6 years under your belt within the region, and your time that you spend on the provincial committees, much less the time that you had spent working with the disenfranchised, with the Aboriginal groups in Vancouver, your podcasts that you've supported for other agencies and things, your conversation. When does it get tiring? And I think for her, keeping that message going and keeping that message strong. But yeah. I don't know if this is a thank you or a how do you do it kind of a question, but yeah. What do you see?
And I firmly believe that, we've, as leaders, we're very personal too. And, yes. My work at, Maine and Hastings in Vancouver, it was very rough on me in terms of my emotions. And, a lot of people, I commend the people that do 24 years in that one little neighborhood helping, individuals that, because you went through heroin age, and then you went through the meth age, and then you went through the HIV and AIDS epidemic, and then you're going through, the heavier drugs that are happening now, and moving into areas of keeping people safe. That's what you normally step into in those roles. And, my experiences now really haven't changed because those memories are still there. And a lot of us go through a form of PTSD because of what we see. And, I carry a lot of those experiences personally, but then now I'm in a different type of role where I'm able to be in the public and be supportive of those agencies that do the frontline work. I have an understanding of it, and I bring that back, right? And, working in political area of nation and industry, well, all that stuff is brand new to me. But what's most important is if I sit in a meeting with industry, it still affects those people on the ground level. And I'm there as a voice, as a conduit to say, well, you might be a good idea to relate to the elders this way, or relate to the youth this way, give them opportunities, always providing opportunities for our people so they can get out of, they can take care of themselves at home. And that's the root of where things happen, is at home. And if we're able to get employment for our parents and get schools access to our children a little more easier, then we're able to functionally work as a community, and our Métis Nation just progresses, right? And I firmly believe, because I was raised that way, that, from my parents, that I need an education. If I'm not getting it, I need to create opportunities for myself, wherever they may be. Flying around the world and going to theaters was my thing for a while, and I enjoyed that life. And then moving into the downtown east side, and then moving into the Métis Nation and where I am today, I take all those experiences with me. And I believe that all Métis youth should have the same access to things, and there should never be any barriers. And I think politicians spend a lot of time creating those barriers because it's always something about money, right? And I don't think money is, money really raises us right, as people. Community does. And we always want to make sure the Métis community is saying, if you're young and you have access to these higher levels of things, I'm going to support the heck out of you, because us as Métis Nation are going to benefit one day, right? And that's pretty much my focal point for a long time. And I encourage young people to get started, get going. And once you're there, you get a letter of opportunity, bring it back to the nation, and see how we can help support you, right, as we move along.
I think listening to Audrey and listening to exactly what you were saying there is, a lot of times for people, they're very focused on what their specific industry, what's happening very specific to their family, what's happening very specific to their community. And I think the reason we put people into place who we respect, we admire, get elected, and Audrey, I could hear from her, and I hear that from you now, is that we have to sometimes look past just the one simple thing that somebody might be asking and ask ourselves, how does that affect the rest of the community? Mm-hmm. Not just as how does it affect, at some point, how does it affect the Métis community right now? Both, how will it affect the youth years from now as they grow up? How does it affect our elders right now? And how will they share that message? But then how does that relationship with the Métis community and then the rest of the culture and Canadians, how do those, what's interpreted from that? So I heard more of your response there, and then definitely in Audrey's, and her response to my question of what message do you have? Well, she had a message for each one of those groups, just like you're thinking of those groups, not just the one. What's happening to all of the groups, because we're all under this umbrella of the Métis Nation. So
yeah, I mean, and I don't feel any frustration for the people that come to us afterwards, after they finish a program and go, look at me now type thing. I'd rather, for me to be able to assist and help them is come to me before they even enter into those areas, and we'll work our way to help, support you type thing. And folks, but I still recognize people's achievements for sure at the same time.
Oh no, I think you have to. Yeah. And folks, for all you listening out there in the squeaky wheel land, thank you for listening for us with Audrey. Lawrence, thanks for those great questions that you asked her. And I think those we're bringing to light. And though you may find you've said the word Daniel's decision 1,000,000 times, I've only said it 1,000 times. So we still need to hear, constantly reiterate to folks the value, the purpose, the necessity, and the what has occurred as a result of the Daniels decision, because we're going to see its impact for the next 50 years, trying to figure out how we continue to move forward as a community.
And then also, people, Daniels, the mechanism, it's just a mechanism. It's not the full extent. There's flaws in the whole area, somewhat in that decision, but at least it's the start. It's the bracket to go, here's the new starting point for the Métis Nation to move from. Let's work on those gaps while we carry on, right? And that's important.
No, totally agree. So anything else you'd like to close out before I take us into, folks, when you want to reach out to us, you want to ask those questions to Audrey, you can always reach out to her at through the albertametis.com. I know Audrey's probably just as easy to reach, whereas you're more available for coffee. I'm not too sure how easy she is just to drop everything and go for a coffee, but you can also email us your questions at tsw@metis3.org. Make sure you visit us. Go to our website, go to the metis3.org. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Lawrence, one of the things that I wanted to talk, or not rant about, because didn't want it to be a negative thing, is I've taken to try and get family or ourselves, my wife and I, to go to more of the local institutions that make Calgary and Alberta. And so just as we had talked a little earlier, and I brought up the Jasper dark roast blend because we were recently in Jasper, folks, I want to see more people still physically distanced going to things like the zoo, supporting Heritage Park, because we have members within the Métis our Métis regional community and our locals that work at Heritage Park, and they promote and they support and identify and create awareness of the Métis community. So folks, I want to see you make sure that you get out to those kind of things. Get down to the Glenbow on the times that it's open, and everybody's struggling, Fort Calgary, to try and figure out how to make a safe place for people to come, and also to open up those doors for that awareness. So that is not so much of a frustrating rant, but of a let's go down the supportive rant today.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to go and look for the Métis stuff in a lot of those areas too. Look for the Métis stuff at the Glenbow. Look for the Métis stuff at Fort Calgary. And, the Calgary Zoo, the parking lot used to be Cuthbert McGillis's homestead, and kind of seeing where the Métis link is, right? Maybe that could be maybe a scavenger hunt for people who live in
that
here.
Was going to be are we going to do a squeaky wheel scavenger hunt that the folks have to send emails in? And thank you for all of you who email the squeaky wheel with your suggestions and ideas. Maybe that's what we have to do. So folks, it might not happen next week, but I foresee us setting something up for a squeaky wheel scavenger hunt. Lawrence, I'm going to close this out there, and I'd like to say thank you to our Jasper roaster. I definitely need to say a very strong and warming and thank you to Audrey Poitras, the president, the 24-year long-standing, one of the most influential people and women in Alberta, and she's been received that accolade nationally. Thank you to our traditional lands. Thank you to our treaty lands, our Métis settlements. Thank you to all of the people within our Métis community that continue to strengthen us. Thank you to our families. I'd like to say thank you to my co-host, as I always do, the president, Lawrence Gervais, who's both a good friend and a fantastic dancer. And thank you to all of our listeners out there in Radio Land. Keep the fire burning. Lawrence, close out.
Well, thank you very much, Ross, for everything today. And hopefully get some more vitamin D out there and gets lots of sleep, build your immune system. You never know, right? If this COVID creeps on you, you want to be ready for it.
We want to be ready for it.
But definitely, the big question now is how kids are going to go back to school. Donald Trump is moving into his campaign. He tried to start a little while ago, but he's still going in there, and hopefully they get it right down there. And that's the most important thing. And whichever way they go, if he gets reelected or if Biden gets in, it's just do the right thing. That's the most important. And folks, I'm not an American citizen. At one time, the American territory reached a little bit of these borders here, but we kind of pushed them back a bit and said, you guys settle here. And then the Métis built that medicine line, the border, right, that you see there. I just want to thank Ross. I want to thank Audrey for coming in today. I know we scheduled on and off and on, and it was finally actually put her here today in front of us. This podcast is growing. Hopefully we're going to do it in person, and that'll hopefully be in the near future.
Thank you for that, Lawrence. And thank you, folks, and we'll hear from you soon.